Ciao da Biotellers, sono Francesco e siamo qua con Lenny Abrahamson, il regista di Frank, uno dei film più importanti di questa rassegna del Biografilm. Thank you for being here with us.
Pleasure.
And we were saying that your movie is one of the head movies in this festival.
Thanks, nice to hear that.
Frank, the figure of Frank is all around Bologna. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I saw it when I got off the plane in the airport. I saw the first poster. It felt very unreal. It was great.
Yeah, but also because it's the face of the Bioparco, that is the place where the bands play, so it's like very famous now.
It's totally, and then last night they had a party for me and I arrived and there's an enormous Frank cake in the shape of Frank's head, so yeah, it's just been surrounded by these images. It's like a nice dream.
It's a nice dream.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's start speaking about the movie.
Sure.
The first question I have is, you move between different moods in your movies, not only in Frank, also in What Richard Did.
Yes.
You know, do you believe that genres are still important, are still useful in these days?
I mean, I think there is an audience, and actually, you know, even the same person in different moods, there is an audience for genre films. There are times when people really want to know, they want to go and see a thriller, or they want to go and see. But I think people also recognize that sometimes those genres can be like little prisons, and you know, all stories become sort of constrained by a genre. So like it has to, each story has to be beaten either into a square or a circle or a triangle.
Yeah.
So with something like Frank, which is a meditation on all sorts of ideas, and it's an adventure, and it's a kind of experiment, and it's an experience, the idea of conforming to a definite genre would be really crushing for the film. And life does not happen in genres.
Yeah.
You know, you move from comedy to tragedy to farce across 2 hours of your life. You know, there's no single genre that life fits.
That's the thing that I realized watching your movies. You know, from What Richard Did and Frank, from the first part you believe you're in a comedy. You know, you're in a black comedy, you're in a comedy, like, I don't know. But while the movie is moving, you know, it changes. It leaves you with something not bad, but something different.
Something different, yeah. And you know, sometimes I think as well, if you start in a certain way in a film and end somewhere very different, sometimes that ending is more powerful because the audience is not anticipating it. If you start in a very tragic key in a film, then people kind of become a little bit self-protective. Maybe particularly in my first film, Adam and Paul, which really has very strong comedic elements, I think that allows the audience to invest in a certain way in the characters, so that when the tone of the film changes, it has a very strong emotional effect. I think that's true also in Frank.
It touches you.
Yeah, and you're not expecting Frank to have that effect at the end, and so people walk out being quite surprised by how they're left by Frank. And it seems to be a pattern in my film, so now I recognize it myself. I never set out to work that way, but as you look more deeply at any situation or any set of characters, I think the emotional meaning becomes more intense. Just like when you get to know a person.
Yeah, but it's really real. Is the thing that I notice now. Is real. Is like real life.
Yeah, so and it's funny, even in Frank, which is in itself, you know, has many absurd elements and some really ridiculous.
Study from Twitter, you know,
exactly, and
the mask.
And there are sight gags and punches and silly fights and things. But actually, yeah, ultimately the power is just always in reality.
Yeah, I have a question about two things. One thing is mask. The second one is Twitter. The first thing I wanted to ask you about the mask is your movie's obviously, you know, an homage to Chris Sievey and his character Frank Sidebottom.
Yeah,
and why did you decide to do it?
Well, so I came to the film a little bit after it started, its conception. So the conception was John Ronson and Peter Strawn, the two writers. John Ronson was in Chris Sievey, John Ronson was in Frank Sidebottom's band. And Frank Sidebottom was...
The name is Frank... I can't remember the name of the Frank Sidebottom band.
It was the Frank Sidebottom's Oh Blimey Big Band. There were several.
Okay.
And it was a very silly kind of, but very creative, silly, comedic thing. But John wrote a memoir about his time in the band, and that became the starting point. And I think originally the guys were thinking about making more of a biopic. But you can't make a biopic about a fictional character, so it's like kind of. But then they decided no, they wanted to move it away from that and into a more imagined space, and also Chris Seavey himself wasn't so keen on the idea of a biopic, but he loved the idea of a crazy imaginative leap from Frank Sidebottom. I think what stayed, apart from the name and this idea of a fake head, was also Chris himself had this incredibly great creative energy, this playful, anarchic.
In Italy is completely
totally unknown, and actually unknown to a newer generation of English and Irish people as well. He was a sort of an underground hit, back in the 80s and 90s, but there was something so kind of he was an outsider creator, Chris, and his spirit, along with other outsiders like Syd Barrett and Moondog and
it reminds me of the Residents.
The Residents, absolutely, with their I mean,
same thing, or maybe the metal band Ghost.
Yes, that's right, and then even I think what are the guys, the big contemporary guys?
Slipknot.
And somebody else who wears a head, they're always in masks.
Slipknot. Okay.
Slipknot.
We have the Genesis, of course.
There's a lot.
But so the Residents, I think.
The Residents are big one. Yeah, and so they all went into this pool of references that Frank was made from.
Speaking about the music, who made the music of the film?
So all of the music is made by Stephen Rennicks, who is a brilliant composer. He wrote the soundtrack of the film, but he also wrote all the songs for the band.
How is it called?
Stephen Rennicks.
He plays in a band or something?
He used to play in bands, but he's a film composer who's worked on all my films.
Okay. Oh, really?
And in fact, we've been best friends since we were about 10.
Okay.
Which is amazing.
Like same like Danny Bramson and Cameron Crowe.
Yeah, exactly.
The same story.
Exactly. And so Stephen, I mean, it's an incredibly difficult job to write music that's believable. Sometimes it's ridiculous, sometimes it's beautiful. So you have like really melodic stuff, you have like a big anthem like I Love You All, and then you also have the crazy stuff they play at the beginning, and it was an amazing job, and it also had to be written to be playable by those actors.
It's quite a different thing to do from maybe it's easier, maybe it's not easier, like to create something that is not a real soundtrack. It's like create a band.
And I've seen it before in films, and you just go, I don't believe that band. But I mean, strange as the music is, I really do believe that it's their music.
I Love You All is really believing.
It really is.
I can't believe it, really. Twitter is highly represented in your movie.
Yeah,
is quite a character.
Yes, it is.
Do you believe that now Twitter and Facebook are the new labels?
Yes, I mean, Twitter particularly. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook. I find it very, you know what it is? There's too much inspirational crap on Facebook, and also it's sort of, Twitter is a purer, because it's so short.
Yeah, it's easier.
It's easier, and it's also, you don't have to be accepted as somebody's friend. You just read what they write. It's very direct. So I got interested in Twitter around the time I got involved in this film, because John Ronson is big person on Twitter. And then we had this idea that instead of using voiceover, which had existed in an early draft, but never a satisfactory, voiceover is a very hard thing to do in a movie, and it's rarely justified. But the idea of using John's tweets as his voiceover was something that came quite late in the process, but really unlocked it for us, because the whole film is about projections and how we sort of, whether it makes sense to talk about the real person versus their sort of their advertised self or their avatar, but actually it's something that we're all so involved in, it's self-promotion and so the
the new era of media.
It absolutely is.
Of music.
Yeah, and so John who's somebody obsessed with how he appears and was trying to promote himself.
I feel the same thing, because I play in a band and I'm doing the same thing with Facebook,
and Twitter, and you're going, hey,
you create your band.
Yes, you do. And I mean, of course, there's no getting away from it. It's not like I'm saying you shouldn't do it, but it was just a much richer way of hearing John's voice than just to have straight voiceover. Okay,
thank you. Before I leave you, I must ask you a thing.
Yeah,
the main theme of the festival is what's culture.
Yes.
So, for you, in few words or maybe in one word, what's culture?
Well, culture is everything. I mean, in the narrow sense, okay, so in the narrow sense, what's culture? I suppose there's official culture, which is, you know, for me, culture is anything which makes me conscious of those aspects of my world which I'm normally not conscious of, which brings to light the patterns and shapes and influences and voices and ideologies that are in the air, but that normally pass by unconsciously. So anything that wakes me up.
Oh, cool.
That's
I
culture.
like it. Ok, thank you very much.
Not at all,
Lenny.
pleasure.
Grazie a tutti e ciao da Biotellers, ciao da Lenny Abrahamson e
ciao.
andate a vedere Frank.